Mary Julie, would you mind on the roll, please?
Not at all, sir. Kara Caston.
Here.
Katie Courtney.
Here.
Ken Dawson.
Here.
Chris Espinoza.
Here.
April Finan.
Here.
Don Renner.
Here.
And Michael Risky.
Here.
Thank you.
All right, having a quorum, let's stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
First reception of visitors, do we have any slips?
Yes, sir, we do. Oh, pardon me.
Whoa. All right, Jerry, you're up.
We do, yeah.
Can I make a comment on that?
Yeah, you said you wish to speak about an action item. So you could do it now, or if you'd like to come back at the end, we could do it at the end. It's up to you. Which you prefer, at the end?
Okay. Fair enough. Item 4, board work.
I'm not gonna throw it, I'll break it for sure.
Well, good evening. After a lot of work this year, we're excited to present to you updates and where we've landed with our attendance. Before we get into kind of the details of it, just a huge kudos to a lot of people that, again, this was our main district focus. As you look at our statement of work for this year, attendance was our main area of focus, right? And so everything that we did really focused in on that. We had a ton of different things that we put into place this year, right? A lot of assistance from a lot of different people in the building. So everything that you're gonna see is the culmination of a lot of efforts, right? It's not just one department, one group, one building. It is all hands on deck. So I'm really proud of our district and how we've attacked a lot of this work, looking at it as individuals and how can I support it, and then as teams, and then as a whole, right? So it's been a great focus, and we've really seen some great things come about from that. So just to recap a couple of things, our work with EAB has been really helpful in helping us to frame what it is that we're doing, why we're doing it. We actually, in the beginning, went through and determined like what are some of the challenges that we might run into, and then how do we plan for those, and that really helped us in our process. But just to recap some of the new things, remember, Infinite Campus is a brand new student information system for us. Most districts, again, first day, if they can take attendance and the bells ring and everything works and day one it's a success. Well, not only did we do that, but we also instituted scanning, right? So we took on more with this, and as we learned throughout the school year, we were able to take on more and more. So I'm really proud of our tech team for a lot of the work that they were able to do in troubleshooting, and the buildings for troubleshooting, like they identified an issue, and they would say, here, can we make this happen? And most of the time was, we're not sure, we'll try it. And most of the time we were able to come back and say, yes, we can, or not yet, right? So we were able to prioritize along those things. So you can see a lot of those things related to our use of Infinite Campus. I talked about the entrance scanning. We also did classroom and office scanning throughout the day. We talked about the unaccounted for report at the last meeting. That gives real-time information for our deans and administrators and able to find students where they are in the building. Some of the other stuff that we talked about, I think that was in January or one of our earlier meetings when we gave an update on our attendance. We have weekly and monthly data reviews, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that, as well as our teachers. An emailed report was created to them every Monday and Thursday that came to their inbox, and it showed how many for their students during that time span, if a student had a tardy, if a student had a single period unexcused absence in their class, right? So that information went directly to teachers so that they could then make contacts based off of that information. So we tried to make it as user-friendly to remove obstacles for individuals so that they could do what we were asking them to do. So when we look at, this is an example of data that we looked at every week. So in Hank's Happenings every Tuesday, he shared the district data where we were at with our attendance. And then Arwen and Courtney, in each of their weekly communications, they communicated with their buildings where we were at with attendance. So you can see several different things here. This was the last week of school. You can see it breaks it down into scheduled minutes, absent minutes. We looked at unexcused minutes. And a big shift this year was that we went from assuming students were present to assuming students were absent. And we made a shift to minutes. So we have down, again, you can see the scheduled minutes. So all freshmen during that week had 1.2 million minutes that were scheduled, right? And the absent minutes of those 1,081 freshmen were just over 68,000. So we looked at this data every week, and we discussed it in our cabinet meetings. Then what we also did was we broke the data down into chunks. So you can see we didn't get going with this right away in the beginning of the school year. We did it after the first 8 weeks, after we had some cadence and we're looking at the data. We said it would be good to look at these in chunks and then compare. How are we doing? Are we progressing? Are we seeing a change in this? So I want to point out that through week 8, that's in essence double what the other 4-week chunks are, right? So if you were to look at that 4-week average in that first week, 8 weeks, those two would break out to be 4,365 roughly. So you can see we started out and then it went up slightly to 4,845, and then it gradually, the trend is that it went down. When you look at the light or the aqua color is District 99, and you can see the building colors are shown by blue with south and purple with north. So you can see that is by those chunks of time where we were at with the number of tardies. Then we went through and we also looked at single period absences. So again, using that same thing in that first 8 weeks, breaking that down into 2 chunks, we're at about 3,395 per each of those first 4 weeks. It jumped up a little bit to 3,665, and again, you can see the general trend was down. Weeks 27 to 30, we talked about that. That was in the month of March. And so we are also, you're going to see near the end of this presentation, we're tracking the weeks that we saw differences in attendance. Why is that so, right? And what do we need to pay attention to next year as we go through that? So that's another thing. So every 4 weeks we did a deep data dive in cabinet, and we looked at the data, and we had a data protocol. Courtney did a great job of leading us through that every time, where we went through and talked about, okay, what do we see in the data? Then we talked about what are maybe some of the reasons why that's happening. And then we talked about solutions. What could we do? So throughout this entire year, it's been an iteration after iteration, right? If you think about each 4 weeks, where we identify something and say, okay, what could we do differently? What do we need to address? And the buildings, then sometimes it was, we're not sure how to do that. They would go back to the buildings, talk about it with their leadership team, and they would come up with solutions, and then we would try to figure out how do we implement that? How do we provide support for those things to happen? Next, I'm going to ask Karen and Patrick to talk about building level work and what it is that they did, because again, the buildings did a great job of trying different things and identifying solutions. That was one of the great things. It wasn't just, here's this problem, right? Let's be solutions oriented, and they did a great job with that. So, Karen.
Sure. I want to really highlight that this was an everybody effort. Like even was, as I'm looking at this bullet pointed list, our communications team at the district office played a big hand in developing the ad campaign, and then that gave the deans and I and the administrative team at the building level like a place to have inspiration to draw from when we were trying to address kids still coming late to school, and how do we better message that? How do we get that out? Our security team, you know, we wouldn't have been able to make the unaccounted for student report work without security taking that report every single period and looking for students. Our CMG helped with the physical arrangement of furniture in the commons to be able to kind of like shrink the commons during study hall time so we could better supervise students and better account for them coming and going. And then, you know, tech, every time we had an idea and we were like, we need a report for fill in the blank, super responsive. So we were really fortunate to have that level of support at the buildings. Some things to highlight from this list, and this actually was an idea that came from the teachers, was the first and last 10 minutes of every single class period. Teachers were not allowed to write students a hall pass, and that made it possible for our security and dean team to make sure that the hallways were cleared at the start of a period, because if a kid was in the hallway, they knew they didn't belong there, so let's get them where they need to go. The tardy brigade was another idea that we tried when we realized we were struggling with kids getting to the building on time. And there were a few different iterations of that. The first was actually issuing a detention upon arrival for kids that had met the threshold. And then we also tried a positive approach of like not necessarily issuing the detention right away, but like, it's going to be automated, you're going to get this detention, so here's what you need to do to be responsible. If you were called in late, make sure you go to the attendance office, those kinds of things. We handed out little slips with cute little sayings on them. And then it was like, you know what, let's just ask some questions and find out why. Why are you late today? And we kept some survey data to help us better make sure that our response to the late arrival to school was the right response. We're still working on that. And then, you know, even like Jake, our associate principal for instruction, had the foresight last summer when building schedules and trying to resolve conflicts to minimize the number of students who would have a study hall during the lunch periods, because it gets really hard when we've got up to 800 students in the commons that are there for lunch, to also identify that there are some kids who are there for study legitimately, and they're not necessarily skipping class. So you might have seen them 2 periods in a row, but one was a study and one's a lunch. But we really minimized that, so we were better able to tell who needed to be there when they were there. And then student activities and our Mustang Way pitched in and came in big time with all of the incentives for excellent attendance. And really, you know, whatever ideas the dean team and I had, we've tried to figure out a way to make it work. We definitely are more well-informed now about what's a hit and what's a miss, and what to try again.
So to start thinking about things that happen at North, I would be remiss not to give a shout out to all the people who were able to contribute to that. This was my first year in this role, and it was interesting for me to learn about how much I can ask people and how much I can dream. So when we're thinking about Infinite Campus, and I would, you know, start a conversation with Travis or Phil and say, so I was thinking about this, and then, you know, within a week they could turn that stuff around. So still learning so much about Infinite Campus, like we're continuing to build in that, and it was really encouraging, and people would take your ideas with enthusiasm. So Travis, Phil, Jim, Tony, Rithik, everyone who made those things happen, it was super important for us because, you know, at the very beginning, it was so much of us trying to get Infinite Campus off the ground, much like, you know, flying a plane while building it. So at the early onset, you'll see we started with community education and also making sure that we had people be informed about what was changing and how it was changing. So we started off by making weekly communications. Courtney sent a lot of those things into the community. We sent out a chronically absent report each semester, which was an interesting learning opportunity for everybody. We were understanding, but the community was like, well, these are excused absences. And then we had the opportunity to kind of get them in the fold and allow people to understand what chronically absent really is. We also did a projected attendance report towards the end. For the last month of school, we're saying if you come to school every day, this could be your attendance. So just giving some people some encouragement there. To start the year, we identified every student who was chronically absent prior to that, and the Alpha team supported by making either a dean, a counselor, or a case manager make that initial contact, so they were able to get them to buy into the engagement of the school year. You'll see that the Tardy Brigade was on that first slide. Our kids affectionately renamed ours the Tardy Party. So, you know, we met them with enthusiasm to have those conversations. That created the unaccounted student report was super helpful. It allowed us to really partner with security and have them interface with students in that accountability. So that is when things actually took a big turn for us, because the teachers felt supported, the students felt seen, and it was just all of us being invested in the same thing. Some of the other highlights here is that we automated recognition for positive engagement. Give a shout out to Tim Tilden, who was our voice of positivity and the announcements, and allowed students to receive these different gifts and encouragement through that. Our own Justin Anderson from the front office went into the community and came back with like a whole bunch of stuff from Andy's and Dunkin's and Starbucks, and I'm not sure how he did it, but it was highly effective. And the kids were really excited. It was really interesting to see students rush into the dean's office, because that's not a place where they're accustomed to having, like, you know, the best experience. They usually leave feeling better than they do walking in, but this was, you know, all positive the whole way through. So there was a lot of things to celebrate there as we were working with Infinite Campus, and then, you know, getting everyone to buy in this effort.
So you've heard some of the things that have happened, and we're talking about kind of that progress throughout the year. So we're going to look at our data by quarter. So what we did, again, each quarter, we met at one of our exec council meetings. We would sit down and we would look at the data, and we would say, okay, what now? So in addition to the weekly cabinet reviews and then the every 4-week reviews, we also at exec council would go through the data. So this is focusing on tardies, right? So if you look at the first quarter, after the first quarter, we had 11,003 tardies. If you were to project that all the way through, we'd have 44,000 and a little bit, right, at the end of the year. You can see it slowed down, right? You can see that in the beginning, there were 2,572 distinct students. So what that means is that there were 2,572 students that had those 11,003 tardies. So across our district, 2,500, just a little bit more, were tardy at one point or another. They had at least one tardy. So when you look at that average per distinct student, it's 4.28 tardies per each of those students. Again, if that trend were to continue, we would be at a much higher than where we ended up. So through the tardy party, whatever you want to call it, right, the brigade, those conversations, lots of work by a lot of people having individual conversations with students. Remember, part of our goal was to improve our attendance and support our students that were struggling. That's a lot where the Alpha team really was beneficial, and they met the students' needs there. So we were talking about this data today that lasts right through the last day of school. To put it in perspective, and Phil had a great point why we were talking about the data, that's 10.38 tardies per each of those just under 3,700 students. That's about one time a month, right? A little bit more than one time a month that a student would be tardy to their classes. What that equates to, when you look at how many periods we have in there, is a 99.1% on-time rate. So when you look at the number 38,000, that might be like, man, that's a big number. We have a lot of kids, and there's a lot of opportunities throughout each day, right, when we look at our tardy numbers. So to put it in perspective and what that looks like.
Travis, I just also want to point that we have to call out there, that we called out this morning,
Yep.
is that's of the students that had one or more tardies. There's a big chunk of students there that
Right.
were 100% on time for an entire school year.
Right. Yeah, we had about 1,000 students, right, that weren't tardy at all. This is if they had one. That's where the distinct student count comes in, right? So even in looking at through quarter one, we were at 2,572, and then quarter four, we're at 3,696. 1,100 more students were tardy in that time. It could have been once, it could have been 15 times, right? The number is not, we don't know what that number is in those 1,100, but we didn't have where every student was tardy. So thank you for pointing that out. So that's our tardy number. So I'm going to shift to our next, which is our single period AUs. And again, just to clarify what this is a student that missed one period during the day and it was unexcused, right? This is not like a half of a day or a full day or anything along those lines. They missed one period in the day that's unexcused. It could have been first period, could have been fifth period, could have been eighth period, right? But it was just one period in the day. So again, you'll see very similar numbers in there. When you look at in the first quarter, we had 8,000, almost 8,200. We'd have over 32,000 if that trend continued, right? So for the entirety of the school year, for the 3,596 students, again, about 1,000 of them didn't have any single period AUs. They averaged about 7.89 single period AUs for those students. Again, that is on average less than 1% of the periods for these students throughout the school year, right? When you look at that 3,596. We want the tardy numbers to be lower. We want the single period AU numbers to be lower, right? So we're not settling, we're not happy with that number, right, Hank? We're not happy with that.
Satisfied with
Not, but we're not satisfied, but this is the first year that we've dug into this data like this. So we couldn't tell you last year what was our first period, what was our third period, right? So we're really trying to tell the whole story, and next year gathering the data and continuing will help us even more in that.
Can I ask you, this is just a lot of data for
It
us
is.
to kind of like take in.
Yep,
When I'm looking at quarter four,
yep.
that 7.89, which is the average number, we don't know if it's the same kids missing each, right? This is just an average. So you could have a child who, I think I talked to this point a few weeks ago, who is always going to miss a class because
Correct.
math just isn't their class. But that's not what this is telling us. This is just saying overall.
You're getting the, like,
So you're-
30,000-foot view
Right.
here.
Right,
Yeah.
so that's hopefully what we want to be looking at going forward.
Yep.
The kids that are probably missing one are maybe the kids that are probably missing more. We don't know that, though.
We do.
Do. And
Oh,
the-
we do.
Yes, and the buildings are having those conversations and working with those kids.
This
So-
is not, this is the, like, the board view, 30,000-foot view of the work.
Right, but so you can understand, like, so my questions are like, so like, the kid, we need to look at those kids. So me not knowing that information.
buildings are.
That's what they're doing, yes, yeah. This is just the big overarching report on kind of benchmark after this year, where do we sit?
So yes, they are having those conversations. They're tracking those students, right? So we have a three-tiered system that identifies students that are having, that need additional support, right? So one of those is attendance, one of those is grades, and one of them is behavior. And when they hit all three triggers, they are getting interventions, they're getting additional support. All of those things are happening at that level. So completely agree. That doesn't mean that all 3,596 of those students had 7.89, right?
Right.
Some might have had 15. Some might have had.
Right, you're gonna have outliers, and then you're
One might
gonna
have
have
one.
your, yeah.
Correct. Yep. So it's just to put it in perspective of what that looks like for those on average. But yes, there are higher and certainly lower.
And can you remind me, how does the formula work for if a child misses one class, but they're still in school, it doesn't hurt our overall school day attendance for children because they are still in the building?
I'm going to talk about that in like
Think-
3
okay,
slides.
Because
Yep. Yep. Very
we're
good.
the same way.
We're right there. We're right there. Okay, so that's the single period AUs. This next one is really exciting. So we talked about engagement and what does it mean for students to be involved in extracurricular activities, right? So what we did was we broke this down by season. So we didn't have anything to report in the first quarter because the first season wasn't over, right? The fall season wasn't over. So when that was over, we looked at through December 19th. If a student was in an activity, that meant that they were in a sport and/or some type of a club, right? Anything along those lines, that number is in there. So in the fall season, just over 60% of our student population were involved in either a sport or an activity. Their attendance rate was 95.3%. And this is minutes, okay? Because I'm going to talk about the difference. This is minute calculations. 1,830 of our students were not in either one, right? And their attendance was 90.66. So you can see almost a 5% difference in attendance of being engaged in one of those things. That trend continues right through quarter 3, which would have been the winter season, and then we did the same thing for the end of the year for the spring season and what that looks like. And we were, between 55 and 60% during that one season of our students. But then when you look at throughout the year, 71% of our students were in either a sport or an activity throughout the school year. So when I look at that throughout the year, they're in the entirety of their attendance, regardless of whether they were in season or out of season, was 93.61%, as compared to 1,300 of our students were not in either of those types of activities, and their attendance was at 87.07%. So being engaged, as we've been talking about, matters, and it makes a difference, and we can see that the data backs that up and supports what we've been saying, and now we know it to be 100% true. Okay?
Do you see any correlation between like a student who just had a fall sport and then did not have a spring sport, and if their attendance dropped like the other non?
So they would have, we didn't get that granular this year. They would have moved into then this 2,000 number, right? So,
For the 1936?
yeah, I can't say whether, their attendance stayed at the same or not. But we did just look at students that were in season, if you will, during that time and engaged, and then those that were not. It's a good question.
And this is a combined north and south.
Correct. Yep. This is for the entire district.
The point being is like, I'm not calling my kid out of school because they have a game tonight. So that's contributing to higher attendance in season, but in the spring, when my kid does not have a sport, I'm more inclined to do that.
Correct.
I guess I'd like to know if that's actually happening.
Got it. We can look at that data.
Or if it's truly just, these kids are actually more engaged than the non-activity students and therefore have higher attendance because of their engagement.
I would say it's probably more the first part that you talked about, just due to the fact of students may be in an activity that lasts an entire year, right? So they would be in that top column all year long.
Like band.
Like band, right? Students that are in sports, we have some probably multi-sport athletes, but most are single sport athletes. Or two, right? So that I would say that definitely can have a factor, but we can dive into it to see for sure. Okay. So then the next slide talks about our contacts. So we talked about what the Monday, Thursday report that our teachers received. So you can see as we were figuring it out and going through in that first quarter, we had 1,020 contacts that were made to 661 distinct students. And you can see we grew more in that second quarter, right? Almost 14, a little bit more than 1,400 more, then about another 1,400, and then about another 1,400, right? So we had consistency in about 1,400 per quarter of contacts that were made. And this is specifically for attendance, right? This is not, I can tell you there's a lot more contacts than 5,325 throughout the school year that are being made by our staff. But this is.
Those are generated contacts, like the text message that parents would receive?
Nope, this is.
A phone call or an email?
Correct. By a staff member.
And they also took the time to log that they
And
sent.
they logged it into
Correct.
Infinite Campus. And these rolling numbers that we're seeing, are they independent of each quarter?
No, that's the total. It's the total through that.
It's
So it's not a,
cumulative.
yeah, it's cumulative.
Yeah.
All of the data that we're showing is cumulative
yeah.
through that.
Yeah,
It's a good question.
because I feel like the rolling, to see it this way, instead of looking at the delta between each one, it would be a very nice way to look at
Yep.
your quarterly reports.
Yep. That's why, and it's about 1,400 each, right?
Yeah,
As
right,
we-
which is the growth
Yep.
that you talked
Yep.
about.
And we're, there were 700 more students, right, that distinct over that time in the second quarter, that were contacted. So the total N, if you will, right, of the distinct students that received a contact was 1,945 students. And again, that's off of that. That is not the automated. I can tell you, anyone that had a single period AU or had a tardy, they got an automated, right? So, but we're not counting that. We're counting the additional effort by our staff.
So overall, that means about 41% of our students over the course of the year had a direct contact that was logged by a teacher over the course of the school year. Regarding attendance
Regarding
only.
attendance only.
Yeah.
Yep.
We
had a
had
separate
about
one.
5 other codes that were heavily used over the course of the year.
We had a separate one for grades, separate one for behavior, right? And so there was other,
So, yeah,
Other
so
things.
there is automated messages that go out for missing a single class.
Yes.
correct.
Each class missed every
Correct.
day. Yeah.
And if they missed more than one, right? So there's an automated regardless of if they miss one or more in a
That's
day.
nice, and then it goes all into into the program.
Yep. Yep. So all of that culminates into when you look at our attendance, and this is what I was talking about with how it's calculated, right? So when we calculated it based off of minutes, again, that's a change for us. But what that means is that every single minute is counted. Okay, so that's a big difference than saying, well, a student was tardy, but they still came to class. They might have been tardy 9 minutes into the period. If they're tardy 9 minutes into the period, they're getting credit for being present for the remainder of the class period. They didn't get credit for that 9 minutes. So when we look at that top number, that's the minute calculation, and again, this is a running right through that time period. So if we look at quarter 4, our overall district attendance for the entire school year using the minute calculation is 92.29%. Okay, that's every student that was here at any point in time during the year, right? Whether they were here for a week, 2 weeks, the entire year, that all of those minutes are calculated in with that.
Could you, I'm sorry, I have so many fun questions.
Fun.
Could you remind us how the breakdown of minutes is with the block and the different scheduled days? Because I know that there's times where students have more common time or, right, because like you've got your 2 days that are your block days.
Yep.
What are those minutes? Because I'm just wondering how those minutes kind of calculate or how that's going to adjust a student's weekly schedule, if that makes sense?
It does.
Because we're looking at different amount of minutes.
Yep. I don't know that off the top of my head, so I can't
Okay.
pull that number in looking,
And
but
it's
it's
going
gonna
to
be
be
student.
based on their schedule too, whether
Right.
they have like
Because 4 days, they have, what is it, 43?
47, 8 47-minute periods. Then they're going to typically have a day with 4
Right.
78 minutes and a day with 3 78 minutes. Plus 2, on those block periods, 2 35-minute access periods. 30? No, 35.
What's that? Oh,
35-minute access periods. But it all adds up to be
Right.
a full school day, right?
Well, I found it interesting when you were talking about how DGS tries hard to not let students go the first and last 10 minutes. And I know as a teacher in block, I mean, those kids come in wanting to ask as soon as they walk into the door. So I was like, well, that's a really interesting thing that we're looking at, hey, you're coming in and you're sitting down, because how many minutes do they have between classes where they could even use the restroom?
With a 5-minute passing period.
Yeah. So then, like, on a regular scheduled day, we're looking at 20 minutes where they're gonna be able to do that. And does DGN do something similar?
Not,
Kinda
we
as
do not
teachers.
have like a 10-minute rule, but we
Like-
have encouraged our teachers to make sure that students are getting accustomed to the classroom, because a lot of them have like bell ringer activities and
Yeah,
things that
right.
get them started, so it's really helpful to have them be engaged from the start.
Yeah.
So, but the rule itself was not something that we put in this year.
Okay, because that would be a nice engagement piece. That's something I know you're wanting teachers to look at going forward. So just making little connections. Okay.
So then the next line is the federal calculation, and this is what is on our school report card. So it's important to understand the difference. We wanted to look at minute by minute, because part of our conversations with kids is every minute matters, right? Every day counts, everything matters. So get to class, be there as much as we want you to be there the entire time, right? And engaged. So when you look at that federal calculation, we end up the year at 93.56%. Last year, our district average for attendance was 92.5%. So I say this loosely because this is our first year using the system, right? I believe that we're gonna be about a percentage higher in our attendance when the next year's report card comes out. Now, there's a lot of variables that are at play that the state, once you send them the data, they do some data analysis, manipulation, metrics, right? And so it could be different, but this is what, with our understanding of Infinite Campus and how it calculates, we believe that to be accurate. So one of those things, again, when we look at just the minute by minute, we are at 92.29, and our average was 92.5 last year using the federal, which uses half days and full days, right? So a student could miss a period every single day and get a full day of attendance. So that's a drastic difference in the calculation and how we're looking at it. So regardless, we improved our attendance, right? I can say that with conviction and belief that the work paid off.
I also want
We're
to
seeing
go
a
back
difference.
to those numbers with what we started with. Last year, the default was that a student was present, right? And somebody had to mark them absent. This year, the default was that you were absent and you had to scan in or be marked present. So you would just assume if we did nothing with that change, that our numbers would have gone down because the default is that they're not there, right? So even with that variable there, our numbers got better. So it leads me to believe that it's much better
Yes.
than what it would have actually been last year. It's just impossible to tell because the calculation method flipped over the other direction. But it'd be reasonable to believe that if we made a mistake last year, the mistake was in the student's favor of being present, where this year, if there was an error in it, it was not in their favor. The error was that they weren't there, right? So even with that factored in, it's a 1% increase.
So we met our target for what we set, right? We wanted to beat our attendance rate the previous year. When you look at our chronic absenteeism rate, we wanted to be lower, right? Because you want less chronic absenteeism. So again, that uses a federal calculation. And last year's rate on our report card was 23.3%. The number that you see there, 23.02%, is a minute calculation. So we cannot, I have not been able to figure out how to do the math to get that, because there's a lot, you want to talk about data stuff that they go through. If a student ended the year with us, but say they were here for 5 days, the previous 170 days that they were in another district or other districts count in our chronic absenteeism. So this is with the students that are in our building, that's where we're at. We can't say definitively that is much, I'm holding that with a much looser hand, because we don't know. We don't know what the experiences of the students are in other buildings if they transferred into us.
Gina's spent more than a decade trying to figure it out what it's going to be before we get it from the state. There's just no way to know because as Travis said, students that are coming and going, their attendance at their other schools counts for or against us. So this is our own internal numbers, so expect that to be a different number when we get our school report card around Halloween of this year. Will be all of the variables that we can't account for. So, you know, when October comes, please don't say, you said it would be, because I have no idea how that state number will end up. That's just our own internal calculations.
Good. Okay, so what that leads us to in looking at in whole, and this is what the data that we looked at this year, for the entirety of the school year, okay? Our tardy count, you can see it's broken down by period. Anything stand out to you? Right? First period, and even second period, right? When you look at both of those things, again, a student could have a single period AU first period and then be tardy second period. There's a lot of different variables that are at play here. But first period stands out, right? The first period of the day. Same thing when we look at our single period AUs. Second period's a little bit closer, right, to that, but first period, that sticks out. The other thing that sticks out is fifth period. And that's our last day, when we look at our first and our last periods of the day. So on our block days, fifth period is our last day, eighth period is our last day on the other days. So if you look at that, you're seeing fifth and eighth. So it's the beginning and the end, and we're having conversations again around that. What does that look like? How can we approach that and put those into place? And we're actually meeting tomorrow to come up with some different solutions and to brainstorm on some of those different pieces.
And have the students been directly asked, hey, why are you missing first period?
Some of them. That's definitely one of the things we need to harness more next year, but part of our tardy brigade was really not necessarily why are you missing first period, but why are you late to school? And some of them wound up, if you're more than 10 minutes late, it counts as a period absence.
Right.
So some of them would have actually landed in that absent column instead of the tardy column.
I would be curious to know how much they say that it's just the time of the morning. You know, I know there are
Start time.
Start time, yeah. I'd be curious to see what other districts who start later, what their numbers look like. 'Cause I know there are a handful of districts throughout the country that are looking at later start times for students
We're one of the later start times in the area.
in the area.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we're probably maybe the latest one in DuPage County or right around there.
Just think it's worth looking into.
May be helpful in the future to separate these last two slides on like block versus non-block days, just to see the like hour by hour. Because when I saw the fifth period, I was like, oh, it's got to be like a lunch. But then I forget that there's the two block days where that is the end of the day. So I think maybe moving forward, having those two separated, just to see like, okay, at 12:30 there's an increase or something like that, might be helpful. Because otherwise I was like, oh man, the kids are like sneaking out halfway through the day.
Yeah, they're not. And one of the other things we've had to get used to in Infinite Campus is period one is always the first period of the day. Period two is always the second period of the day, right? So when you look at periods 1 through 5, those are happening every single day of the week. Periods 6, 7, and 8 are only happening on Monday, Tuesday, and Friday on our non-block days, right? So that's another thing that we've had to get used to, because we're used to, in
meeting
block
one.
days, we would say period 2 is meeting, right? And really, that's period 1 in our schedule.
Gotcha.
When we talk about Infinite Campus. So that's something, when we've analyzed the data, we've had to remind ourselves, okay, period 1 really is the first period of the day. It's not, you get where I'm going with that, right? So what that all has led us to, and you've seen the statement of work, right? You understand kind of where we're at, attendance and accountability that's been established in this school year. We're going to build on that, right? And we're working towards that. And our action, our statement of work with that is that we're monitoring intervention reach and frequency, overall attendance rate, chronic absenteeism, first period attendance by building. Again, that goes with tardies and single period AUs, or just having an absence in that first period. And then a low attendance week patterns compared to prior years. So there are a couple of weeks that we identified this year. One of them was Thanksgiving week, right? So that was something that fed into and we talked about as part of our change with that. Question.
Is there any correlation between students who consistently miss first period and chronic absenteeism?
I can pull that. I don't have that data off the top of my head. Typically, the chronic absenteeism is going to be more of a fuller day, so it's not going to be in that single period AU data that I shared, because that is, again, just if they missed one period in the day.
So there are kids who are just consistently late to first period.
Correct.
But
Yes.
may be perfectly in regular attendance thereafter.
Right.
Actually, what our data shows is once a student is on our campus, then they are generally in class, and they are generally in class on time. The hardest part is getting kids to school and getting kids to school on time, which is one of the frustrating things in the data. It's one of the things we have very little control over. That's why, obviously continuing to work on first period is a focus, right? And if we hyper-focus on that one, the more students we can get in the door to start the day, the better our data will be overall. 2, this is about relationships with families and students, because a lot of our students do report that I'm late because my parents dropped me off late, right? Well, that's not in the student's control necessarily always. Sometimes it is, and it's definitely not within our control as a school. So, how do we move that needle knowing that we're trying to impact a variable that is less under our control than the other ones, which we are seeing the things under our control. Karen, Patrick, the teams and the buildings are very much controlling those variables and getting kids to class, getting them there on time. So that's one of the challenges here, is how do we lean into a variable that's less under our control than the other ones we've been working on this year.
Do we see any correlation between grade and first period absenteeism? Like, are ninth graders more likely? Or once I have my car and I drive to school, I'm more likely to be on time?
I can speak. At South, our bus riders are at school on time.
Okay.
Because the bus is dropping them off
Yeah.
on time. Our students who have earned parking privileges are on time.
Okay.
Because they did what they needed to do to earn the parking privilege, and they're generally kids who have the habits that will get them there.
Okay.
The kids that are showing up late are neither of those two groups, right?
And the grades part, we've dug into it a little bit, but not to that level of breaking it down by period. Our chronic absenteeism, correct me if I'm wrong, but I can't remember what the data is. You shared it today. Can you recite that, what you had?
Which part?
With the chronic, when you look at your chronic absenteeism list, the number that have all,
So we have almost 50% of our students who are chronically absent have A's, B's, and C's. So it's not the profile that we used to see. A lot of students who are chronically absent are passing all of their classes.
there's not as much of causation, right? There's more correlation now with those types of data metrics.
That doesn't mean that those A, Bs, or Cs didn't come without a heavier lift from our team, though, right? That is obviously a teacher interviewing, or other supports, or counselors, or all of those things, deans, obviously. So a student with poor attendance that's earning an A, B, or C is probably coming with a heavier organizational lift than a student that is there regularly in attendance and earning an A, B, or C.
Plus they're missing out on social emotional learning, plus they're interrupting class activities that require their regular attendance, so.
Yeah.
Just because they have good grades doesn't mean we are going to be lax on them in that.
Correct. Correct. Aaron, Patrick, anything to add to what we've discussed from the building perspective? Okay. Any other questions on attendance?
Thank you, team, for all of your work on that report and the data crunching throughout the year.
Just one final thought. Do you have like goals for next year? Have you thought about as a team?
That's what the next month is working
Okay.
on, starting
Okay.
with our meeting tomorrow.
Okay.
So we'll come back with updates as we head into the next school year as to what those goals are and what the kind of general work plans are for the year. So the month of June is really the administrative team focused on putting that all together.
Okay.
All right, next one up is behavior.
So you get the same team. We're talking about this again, and as we're talking about the behavior component of this and the different areas there, I want you to, you saw the memo on the handbook changes, right? So you can see a lot of what we're talking about is related to this. So just think through that lens as well with some of the conversations that we're gonna have. So really, we're gonna focus on the attendance and the impact on behavior. Attendance has had an impact on grades as well, right? Remember when we talked at the end of the first semester and we saw, look, our attendance is better, our grades of our students are better, right? And that's not just attendance, but it's also cell phones. It's also our academic integrity. There's a lot of variables that are at play and that support that. So when we, continuing with the attendance, we talked about the single period unexcused absences and excessive tardies is where students receive consequences for those types of things. Again, as we were talking about in the beginning of the year, our practices have evolved and shifted throughout the entirety of the year. So we did automate, and what that means is that when a student has a single period AU at South, then they were getting a consequence for that was automated. It would be communicated to them, be communicated to the family. It would be processed at the end of the school day. So teachers have until the end of the school day to clean up if they missed something or it came through. So what that means though with that automation, then sometimes we had to go back and clean things up, and you see that at the very bottom. Automation is problematic and the cleanup is needed when mistakes occur. But we want to be timely with information, right? And so that's the timeline that we've worked with. And then tardies for the majority of the school year were also automated at South. We didn't get that going right away, but we figured that out about how far into, was that?
Second semester.
For the automation. So second semester is where we were fully running with that automation. And then at North, they began with automating with second semester with tardies only. They didn't do the single period AUs. Next year, we plan on doing the automation for both, for single period AUs and for tardies at both buildings. We're going to stay consistent in that approach. So things that we learned from that automation of this year, it's helpful, for consistency and streamlining the process. But it also is problematic in that we have to clean up, but it also helps with our attendance in getting it cleaned up, right? If there was an error or something along those lines, if there's an automation, we're addressing it a lot quicker, where then that is, hey, I received this, I was there, they go and talk with their teacher, get it cleaned up, and all is good, right? So there's benefits and drawbacks to that. So then we're looking at shifting gears, and if you guys, when you were at the parent-teacher advisory, you heard this with the B code information, and we saw a definite impact on that. So I'm going to transition this over, and I think that Patrick is going first with the B code.
Just a quick summary. You may have heard Kelly and Karen talk about this here previously. You may have heard me talk about it at the parent-teacher advisory over the last couple of years. I was formerly the PATH coordinator. So this is D99's supportive approach to discipline. This is the in-school intervention program. So this is where students are, they have a level of accountability for their behaviors where it's being processed in the school, keeping them connected to both their learning as well as, accountable to their peers. So what this does is it encourages the students to engage in restoring those relationships as well as thinking about how it impacts others. That's always one of the more interesting moments once you have a student who's confronting the mistakes they made and you say, who else did this impact? At that age, they're often like, well, me. And then it stops there. But if you kind of push on that, it really helps them think about like their general impact on the community and the school that they invest in. So what you'll notice here is that recidivism, or the repetition of these B codes, which is essentially the things that would get you suspended, right? So we have about we have an exact 80% success rate. So this year there were 20 students who met the threshold of receiving a 3-day in-school suspension. And then those 3 days are used to help those students work with that behavior and think about how it's impacting others. And then the overall goal is that they don't make the same mistake, right? So like we accept you and you make mistakes. This is a high school. That's what it's here for. So the goal is just not to repeat. But of those 20 students, 2 of them did repeat that. So overall, very effective.
And similarly, at South, we had an 80% success rate with PATH this year as well. You'll notice kind of a downward trend both at North and South over the years, which helps us recognize that PATH is working by and large, right? But also I think what really helped limit or reduce the number of referrals for a B code violation is the fact that we had strong tier 1 attendance interventions in place, right? When students are in class and learning, they're not in the hallway engaging in misbehavior. They're not meeting up with a friend in the bathroom to do naughty things. So when we as educators think about the tiered processes, it's just a really strong reminder to us of how important tier 1 is, and will continue to be. But we continue to be really proud of our PATH program and grateful that that the board supports it, the district supports it. Our students are much more connected. There are many students who go into that program not able to identify a trusted adult in the district, and by the end of the 3 days, either they're naming the PATH coordinator as that trusted adult, or through their conversations with the PATH coordinator, they're like, you know what, actually, I really do go to fill in the blank person if I need to. So just even helping students to identify those connections has been really, really helpful.
So next is academic integrity. You'll notice at DGN there was 94 distinct students that met or made the mistake of cheating on one of their assessments. This approach this year has shifted from being like reactive discipline to learning centered. And these lessons actually take place in the in-school intervention room. So the Academic Integrity Committee partnered with our PATH coordinators to find a home for that work, which of course that's like a perfect place for it, as we've talked about the in-school interventions and the PATH programs. So that's been continuing to develop. I know our AI committee right now is doing a lot of work to identify what that challenge is going to be like and how that's going to complement the academic integrity lessons. Also here you'll see that DGS had 62 distinct students, and then you can see that the recidivism rate of that is less too, as the students are getting accustomed to learning about this. So on the next slide, you'll kind of see some of the things that I was touching on.
Good.
Yep.
The beep, sorry.
Yep, you're all good. So a lot of education at the onset of this, as the system itself has 4 different steps. So our staff needed to understand how they're working cooperatively with the deans. Our PATH coordinators needed to learn how they were going to support that in the room and how all the scheduling took place. So this developed a few times throughout the year, and then this summer with the AI academic work, that's going to improve that as well. But you'll see here at the bottom, key takeaway, this is a skill, and we want to make sure that people are accountable, and we want to make sure that we're teaching our kids when they make mistakes, that there are ways to avoid that, and that there are better ways for them to be original in their work.
Can I ask real quick?
Yes.
When you talk about academic integrity and what infractions you saw, are we to assume that it's it can't be all AI, or is it all, like, do you have what those most common infractions were by students?
So, I mean, we have details of those students. It would be a combination of them using other people's work, which is not going to be AI driven, but it is usually technology driven. They have a document that they're sharing, or someone sends something so that they can look at it, or, you know, there is still like the old school, like I wrote this on my arm, or I have this card at the back of my calculator, and things of that nature. But the AI portion is interesting, and that hasn't been something that we looked into specifically, what portion of this is AI, but that is definitely something that people have been focused on as it's impacting the classroom and the students' ability to or wish to be original in their work.
Because I'm just wondering, I know we talked before about AI and how there's really, we don't have a lot of parameters on what can and can't be copy and pasted because we don't know yet, right, with our system. But like when students come into an English classroom, there might be a time where they're gonna use that time to create a writing piece.
Mm-hmm.
Do we have lockdown ability when they're in that English classroom, like a para or some type of a thing where you're gonna say, okay, there's no way for them to cheat because they are writing in a lockdown setting on their computer?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we have exactly that, the
do
Hapara
have a
program with the teachers, and you know, they can limit what you have available to you. They can also freeze so that they are dictating what you're able to use, and you know, put the guardrails on so that they're not going to AI machines to create their original thoughts.
And is Hapara training something that is part of what will be happening with AI training? Is that something that the committee is looking at?
I would have to ask about the AI committee and the work that they're specifically looking at.
It hasn't related to Hapara. We've had Hapara for a number of years, so that the use of that tool that you're talking about, we've been using, and we have that functionality of it. We do have another tool that we're going to be rolling out, and there will be professional learning
I
that
know
will be associated
we
with
can
that.
have it, but if teachers aren't trained in it?
No, they're trained.
We have had professional development sessions where teachers can elect to go, if they want to use Hapara, they can go through their, like, our teachers, our instructional coaches are leading that, and leading sessions on Hapara about the different features that they can
There's-
use,
yeah.
how they can lock it down, how they can, you know, use it throughout class, how they can use it minimally. So we do offer that for sure.
Okay.
We also have drop-in support and those kinds of things that as teachers need it, they can get the help they need.
Because the AI thing is a new committee, right, if I'm remembering
Yes.
correctly?
Yeah.
And who's on, like, who's on
There's a
that?
representative of teachers and administrators from across the district. And then they've even broken into subgroups by content area.
Deans and
So there's been like
department
a CSSS subgroup, there's been an English teacher subgroup.
So that we're hearing voices from all the different, wonderful.
Very much so.
I would just say the last thing on that, partnering with that AI committee, is really trying to create like a common language for both students, teachers, and families to understand when you're allowed to use what and to what extent, because, you know, AI has kind of happened so quickly that, you know, like we're still trying to figure out exactly how we can dictate what the students should be using, when they should be using it, so it's predictable, just like a rubric would be in the classroom.
And it's a tool we want our students to develop in their understanding and their use of it, right? It is a life skill tool that we want our students to be prepared when they leave 99.
And our path coordinators, in working with students through the modules to kind of reteach expected behaviors around academic integrity, identified this year that we've got a gap in kind of how we're able to differentiate that learning for students, especially with like our EL students who are coming from a whole different educational system, and not even just the vocabulary. Academic integrity is a lot to chew on for them. But so not understanding even that what they did was a violation of our academic integrity policy. And so looking at how we're going to push into EL classes next year to proactively teach some of those things. So, I mean, this was the first year under this new framework with academic integrity. And, you know, we saw very, very low recidivism. And I anticipate it will only get lower as we get better about knowing what we need to teach, to whom, how, and when.
And tying to this, the handbook, there is some language changes related to our academic integrity, right? And so it's from the lessons that we learned this year to make it clearer for the students, for our staff, right? Making sure that it's of the assessments of learning, right? This is applying to the assessments for learning, our course team decisions and things along those lines. So that is clearly spelled out in the revisions to the handbook.
We had new language in the handbook this school year for cell phones as well. And we've got documented there the number of total referrals and then the number of unique students. So South saw more students repeat the behavior than North did. And in general, though, we're continuing to learn, and there was just legislation. So I guess, if you want to advance to the next slide for me, on the right-hand column, watch legislation. We just watched it happen. So every school district is required to have a policy similar to what we have in place for next year. But we're continuing to do learning as well around what we also have young adults in our buildings. And how do we teach them to be responsible, follow our rules, yes, but also prepare them for the not so distant future when they are employed and need to be disengaged from their phone, when they are in a lecture hall at college and need to be disengaged, and so on. And so Angela Duckworth has done a lot. She's the same researcher who researched grit and wrote a book about it maybe 15-ish years ago now. But she has done a lot of research around cell phones in schools. Patrick let me know that because of him, we participated, District 99 participated in said survey. So we're included in her data. But one thing that she speaks about is situational agency. And it's what many of us do anyway, right? Like if you want to make sure you exercise in the morning, you're gonna be more successful if your shoes are right next to your bed, your workout shoes, right? When I go to the grocery store, if I can say no to the candy aisle once, the chocolate doesn't wind up in my pantry, so I don't have to say no to it every time I walk past the pantry. So similarly, what her research found is that the further away the phone is, the higher the GPA. So the kids who study with their phones here are more distracted by their phone than the kids who have it on the other side of the room and have to get up to go check it, who are who are more successful than the ones with it here, but the ones who have it, charging in the kitchen outside of the space where they're studying are most able to be engaged in their learning. And so we plan next year to continue the use of the phone pouches, and that phones, if they're visible in the classroom without explicit adult permission, that's a referral. And so we, will see high numbers of cell phone referrals probably initially until kids adjust those behaviors and those not obsessions, behaviors like patterns, like routines, rhythms.
Habits.
Habits, that's the word I'm looking for, thank you. Yes, those habits.
And included in those revisions as well, right, instead of talking specifically about phones, we're talking more about personal devices, right? So smart glasses are becoming more of a thing, right? So being clear that if they're using smart glasses, that could be asked to put those in the holder, right? So we're going to communicate that well because sometimes they're prescription, right? And so then what do I do with those? So be clear that is something that could also that goes in the pouch. So instead of just focusing on cell phones, we have the pouch. It can fit more than a cell phone in there. And just doing a first read through that legislation, we have things in place that are going to carry us through 2030 right? So the 2030, 2031 year is when we would need to address, and that'll give ISB time to write their guidelines and regulations, and we can see what exactly that looks like. But we're well positioned with the recent legislation that was passed sometime early this morning. Any questions about any of the components that we covered in the behavior? We're seeing an impact on all areas related to the decisions that we made last year and that we put into place this year, positive. Okay. So going right along into the student and family handbook, I will say that the athletic activity handbook, there are no changes, right, to that. When we look at the handbook changes for, we covered most of them as we were talking through this. We added loss of privileges to all of the different consequences as a component that could be utilized. We have found that that has a nice impact on students, right? Having just one thing doesn't usually work. You got to find out what works for students as they're going. So the additional, the search for with using a handheld metal detector, we have that as a clarifying option for us, right? If that is needed. Talked about loss of privileges, and then we talked about in the last presentation of the assessment of learning versus assessment for learning. So any questions?
When are handheld metal detectors used? Entering the building?
No, if it's a search in a dean's office,
Oh, okay.
we have reasonable suspicion and we may use a wand.
Okay. Yeah, I was worried about profile.
No.
No.
But it also could be used as part of our exit or our entry strategy, right, with the student, if there's a concern that we have with a student, it could be.
Yeah, if we have reasonable
could be-
suspicion and we're searching, then, yeah.
Okay.
So these are up for approval at the next board meeting. So if you have any questions between now and then, go ahead and reach out. It's kind of like a policy revision, because ultimately a handbook is board policy after the board approves it. School resource officer agreement with Downers Grove. We have a school resource officer in each of the two schools. They are, thank you, Karen and Patrick.
Good job.
Appreciate you guys.
Good job, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We have a SRO in each of the buildings. They are employees of the Village of Downers Grove as Downers Grove Police. Then we have an agreement with them, an intergovernmental agreement that outlines all of the practices. Over the years, we've had an intergovernmental agreement with them for decades that has had like minor updates here and there. A few years back, Chris, you probably were on the board when we had the body-worn cameras added. So we've had addendums over the years. This year, because of changes in state law, there's a total rewrite of that agreement. That has been reviewed both by the board's attorneys and the village attorneys. So it's all legal stuff aligning with changes in state law. Ultimately, I can do my best to answer questions for you, but really, this is something that the attorneys have worked out and is aligned with all of the changes that have occurred over the last couple of years regarding SROs. This also comes back for approval at the next board meeting, so I just encourage you to take a look, reach out if you have any questions, happy to answer those for you. Collective bargaining agreement with the CMG staff, this is an action item this evening. I shared the summary of, the actual contract with the board and a summary of changes. This has been a great process with the CMG bargaining team. It was very collaborative. I think we spent less than 24 hours in face-to-face time working through it. It's a 3-year deal, and we're really happy with both having this agreement in place. It was ratified by their group with 100% yes. And contains some creative ideas of like cost savings of or cost sharing of savings that can be captured through that team. So the administration recommends that the board approves this later this evening. Any last questions on this? All right. Also, last one, discussion topic for the board. Sometimes the board has additional workshops where we bring in, we do the Starting Right workshop following board elections. I'm just putting it here for you to think about, or if there was any discussion at the table. We can do, in the years we aren't doing the Starting Right workshops, we can do ISB comes in and does just board goal setting or board self-evaluation workshops or those kinds of things. They can do board governance, a variety of different items. So if there's anything that you would like for me to arrange for, over the summer or at the start of next year, please let me know. I don't know if there's anything that you wanted to discuss as a board at this point, or if you wanted this to come back again in the future. Turn it over to you.
I like the idea of training self-evaluation. I would be supportive of something like that in the off years from the elections where we're,
Yeah, I like to see what's
Yeah.
available.
Sure.
And how that breaks down different categories. I would imagine there are categories within what is offered to see what would best fit us in this off year where there isn't a new turnover.
Okay.
I don't know if it's appropriate, but it might be a good time to evaluate what we look for in a superintendent.
You could start those conversations, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hopefully when I retire, not in the meantime.
Just want to keep you on your toes.
Yeah, thank you. All right, I will reach out to ISB and I'll provide you guys a menu of options that they bring and we can see from there. Thank you. All right, action items.
First off, can I get a motion from the Board of Education to approve the personnel actions, appointment certified, leave of absence, certified appointment classified as presented?
So moved.
Second.
Chris moves, Katie seconds.
Thank you. Christopher Espinoza.
Aye.
Katie Courtney.
Aye.
Ken Dawson.
Aye.
April Finan.
Aye.
Michael Riskey.
Aye.
Kara Caston.
Aye.
And Don Renner.
Aye, motion carries. And then item B, can I get a motion from the Board of Education to approve the July 1st, 2026 through June 30th, 2029 agreement between the custodial maintenance and grounds employees and the Board of Education of District 99?
So moved.
Second.
Ken moves, Chris seconds.
Thank you. Ken Dawson.
Aye.
Christopher Espinoza.
Aye.
April Finan.
Aye.
Michael Riskey.
Aye.
Kara Caston.
Aye.
Katie Courtney.
Aye.
And Don Renner.
Aye, motion carries, and just want to say congratulations to the administrative team as well as the CMG representatives who worked hard in getting that agreement in place.
Thank you. I'd like to circle back. There was one more thing in board planning for next year that I missed. We are joined this evening by your next board secretary, Evie Sherman. We're excited to bring Evie on board. She's currently serving in a similar role in West Chicago, District 94, similar high school district, just up the road. So we were excited to steal her and bring over her expertise to our team. So you'll be seeing a lot of Evie next year. She's already shadowing, spent most of the day here with Julie, drinking from the fire hose. Get ready for District 99. So please, at the end, introduce yourselves and say hello.
All right, item 6, second reception of visitors.
Jerry, you made it.
Jerry Kiluk, Douglas Grove resident, District 99 employee. I'm here to witness the significant moment. First time ever, CMG employee have a contract with Board of Education. I want to say thank you to the Board of Education to approve the contract. I want to thank you to CMG employee, union, and administration staff for hours and hours of commitment to compromise, and seems like fair contract for everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, Jerry.
Thank you for coming tonight. Appreciate it.
I didn't even have to count down Jerry's 3 minutes.
All right, and finally, can I get a motion from the Board of Education to go into closed session under Open Meetings Act exception number 1 for personnel and Open Meetings Act exception number 2 for collective negotiations?
So moved.
Second.
Ken moves, April seconds.
Thank you. Ken Dawson?
Aye.
April Finan?
Aye.
Michael Riskey?
Aye.
Kara Caston?
Aye.
Katie Courtney?
Aye.
Christopher Espinoza?
Aye.
And Don Renner?
Aye, motion carries, and for the members of the public, the only action the board will be taking when we come out of closed session will be to adjourn. All right, we'll take a short break and we'll